Hey guys, Andy here at Gale's Harley-Davidson, and it's 2 o'clock. Time for our 2 o'clock workshop live on Facebook. So today we are going to go over pre-ride checklist. So I tell people till I'm blue in the face, mirrors, tires, and neutral. Those are my three main rules as far as your checklist before you take off. So mirrors, when you're sitting on the bike, you always want to make sure that you adjust the mirrors properly so that you're seeing everything behind you. Because all it takes is one bump in the garage like that, all of a sudden you're looking at right field instead of right lane. So always check your mirrors, and then always make sure that your neutral indicator light is lit. And I even, people call them dummy lights, indicator lights, whatever the case may be. No matter what I'm doing before I start it, I always make sure I'm pulling the clutch in, whether it says neutral or not, just because I don't want it to slip into gear and potentially jump. So it's just one of those, I'd rather double check than not check. So we know we're in neutral. We've checked our mirrors, so we're optimizing our viewpoint behind us. And then tires. So we're going to go into tires first, and then we'll come back to this. So the best rule of thumb on your tires, you always want to make sure you're running 36 in the front and 42 in the back. Now, that's a good general rule of thumb. What I would strongly suggest is that you actually access your Harley-Davidson owner's manual, as you can see here. And in the back, there's an alphabetized index. You go to tires, and it will tell you the exact tire pressure to optimize performance and wear for your particular model in your Harley-Davidson owner's manual, which I'm sure all of you have read cover to cover before now, right? Right. Oh, I just did the finger gun. Bringing it back, right? So make sure you got a good accurate tire gauge. This is obviously very important, and it's just like checking it on your car. So pull the cap, hit your gauge. So right now I'm reading, I'm gonna hit it again. So right now on this, I'm reading 22 pounds, which means I'm not ready to leave because this is well under the optimal tire pressure for the front on a Harley. So before I take off, I'm going to make sure I'm hitting the compressor and bringing that tire pressure back up to optimal. So, and then obviously you're going to check the back. I'm not going to crawl around on the ground because you pretty much know it's the same thing. But the valve is like up there. So then you just got to roll the bike until you get the valve back to where it's accessible and down here. So tire pressure, tire pressure, tire pressure. And since I'm not taking off, I'm talking to you. I'm just going to leave that alone for now. So next thing I want to do since I'm in here is grab a rag. Now, I had already made sure that the bike was warm, because you always want to make sure you check your vital fluids before you take off. Primarily your engine oil. So on this Softail model, it's warm, and on the side stand, the Jiffy stand. So we just pull that out and then give it a wipe, and then run it back down and pull it back out for our accurate reading, which we're right at full, so we're in good shape there. Ah, dang it. And don't do like I did, which just drip on your pipe. Bad Andy. Okay, all better. All right, make sure that run, always make sure you get that down good and tight, because otherwise when the engine oil gets hot, and if you lose that, or if it flies out, you could actually, it could burp some fluid, some of the oil back up through, and then that's just gonna be a hot mess. All right, so we checked our oil, we checked our tires, we checked our mirrors. So now typically what I do, depending on if you're riding 2-up or riding solo, a lot of bikes nowadays, the touring bikes have adjustable suspension. Now the Softails have adjustable suspension as well. And that's what this is right here. So this actually adjusts the level of preload. So depending on how much weight you're carrying, you want to set it accordingly. Again, we go back to that owner's manual, and it will give you the accurate setting given the weight load that you're carrying. So in my case, I weigh 200 pounds. I'm going to check the owner's manual to see where I need to set it. Worst case scenario, if I'm riding something that I haven't ridden before, the settings on this are 1 through 3. So I'm going to set it in the middle, and I'll ride it for 50 or 100 miles, see how it's feeling. And it depends on what type of riding you're doing too. If you're just doing straight highway riding, setting the cruise at 70 miles an hour, then you want it to be a little softer, a little more forgiving. Now, if I'm ripping it hard in the twisties, I really want the stiffer suspension and really pushing the tires to the pavement. So I'm going to stiffen that up. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. So the further you loosen it, the softer it gets. Subsequently, the tighter you go, and the stiffer the suspension gets and more responsive. So we've adjusted our suspension, we've checked our oil, we've checked our tires. So now I want to do a light check, because as I mentioned in previous workshops, I'd rather piss somebody off and they see me than make sure, than the alternative being them not seeing me. So you always want to flip your ignition switch on. Sorry, I'm going to swing around this way. Have we got any questions yet? We doing good? Okay, negative on the questions. That means I'm answering them all. That kicks ass. So we hit our ignition, and I want to make sure, one, that my indicator lights are working, and obviously the speedo, because if I'm going to ride into the dark, I want to make sure I can see how fast I'm going. So our indicator lights are working, our speedo lights working. Now typically what I do now is actually turn on the hazards so that it saves time, then that way all of the flashers are going all the time. So we check our turn signals, we got left and right, we're good there. And up front, we got run and turn, so we're good here. Now in the back, it doesn't have the traditional brake light on this bike, so these run, turn, and brake. So with the ignition switch on and the hazards going, I can actually check all three so that I know the running lights work, the turn signals work, and the brake lights work. So I'm going to turn the hazards off, and then I always want to double check the brake lights separately, because there are two different brake switches on Harleys between the front brake and your foot brake or the rear brake. So I always want to make sure, and when it's the daytime, I just hold my hand back there just to make sure that it's illuminating, and then I'm going to hit it with my foot because that's just as important. All right, so we got brakes. All right, now I'm going to head to the other side. Make sure I've got my low beam, so good there. Then I'm going to hit my high beam. Quick hand check, low, high, low, high, low, high. All right. And my indicator lights on the high beams are working as well. The other thing, just for S&Gs, I always give it a horn blast, because worst case scenario, if you got to blow the horn, you don't want to use your mouth. So, all right, we checked our oil, we checked our tires. I had it on the battery tender last night, and I made sure this morning that I had a green light on the battery tender, because the worst thing you want to do is, after it's been sitting 2 or 3 weeks, get to your second or third stop on your ride, come out, hit the switch, and get the click, 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 click. That sucks. Nothing worse. So you always want to make sure that if it's been a stretch, you plug it into your battery tender. Everything that we sell, pre-owned and new, we equip with the battery tender on every single motorcycle, just as a convenience for you guys. And that way you don't have to mess with it, and we know it's hooked up right. But yeah, those things are absolutely worth their weight in gold, because they will extend the battery life. I've found at least 2 to 3 times when the battery is maintained properly. So, one to bear in mind. The other thing I do is just to verify, because this actually has an electronic fuel gauge, which anytime anything is electronic, it can have some idiosyncrasies. So I'll pull the fuel filler cap and look down and just kind of check the accuracy as far as visual check versus the electronic, because the electronic's telling me I got a little over a half a tank, and by looking down in it, yeah, it's about right. So at a half a tank, then I'll run through and go to my range, and it says about 122 miles based on how I rode it the last time, how far I'm going to get on the remainder of that fuel. Now, where I am now, I know where I can get gas. Where I'm going to end up in 100 miles, you never know. So I typically always start out with a full fuel cell, just for my own peace of mind. All right, so we've got headlights, we've got our engine oil, we got our tires, we've got all our lights. Hi, Gail. What's up? The only other thing I do, because I know this is crazy and it's weird, but every time before I take off, especially on this particular model, it's actually a Sport Glide, and the Sport Glides have detachable saddlebags. So I always want to make sure, because, you know, hey, we all forget to do things sometimes. Sometimes the simplest and easiest step are the ones we forget to do. So I always want to make sure that it's in, that all my mount points are locked in. And then the cool part about this is throwing you a red flag. Kind of like when you put the mail in your mailbox, put the red flag up to let you know, hey, you got mail in there. So when you're in a locked position, you're green or good to go. Unlocked, you got the little red flag. So I always make sure that those are down and good. One, because I want to make sure the lid's closed too, because I don't want the lid flopping open, and I don't want the bag coming loose. So Harley typically suggests 92 or better octane, because the higher the octane, the better performance, the cleaner it runs, the more fuel it burns, the better mileage you get, and there's less chance of detonation. So when you're running a lower octane, sometimes those valves can ping and it makes weird noise, and yeah. Now if you're running out of gas and all they have is 89, pump you enough to get to the next gas station. We all got phones, we all got Google, we all got maps. So pump enough to get to the next fuel stop, and make sure you go back to the 92. It's not going to hurt anything running a lower octane. It just performs a lot better on a higher octane. So typically, and there are a few stations around town that actually do 94. And you can tell a difference in how the vehicle runs. It's the same as in your car. If you look at race fuel, the octane levels are off the charts because they're expecting higher performance out of the machines. So there's your answer. But 92 is Harley's answer. So double checking my other bag. What's that? Yes. So typically, and it depends on where the battery is in relation to where the battery tender lead will be, because you want to make sure that it's somewhere that isn't going to impede on any of the moving parts. So there's your battery tender lead. Pull the cap, plug it in. Typically, anytime I'm not on the bike, I just plug it in, because it actually monitors the peaks and valleys of the electrical system, and it kicks on as needed. So if it's run down a little bit, it'll kick on until it's maxed back out, and then it kicks itself back off. All you do, that's what we install every time. So, and it'll, you know, again, depending on the bike and the level of convenience and where the battery location is, that will typically dictate which side that the pigtail is on, and kind of how we tuck it in lovingly to make sure that it's accessible, it's still aesthetically pleasing, and it's not impeding with any of the moving parts or laying up against a header or the muffler and cooking it, essentially. So battery tenders here, good to go there. We've checked our lights, we've checked our oil, we've checked our fuel, we've checked our bags, mirrors, tires, we're in neutral. Yeah, I'm pretty sure now all we gotta do is turn the key and start enjoying the weather. So pre-flight check complete. we're ready to ride. I'll see you guys tomorrow at 2. Don't forget to give me some ideas of anything that you want to see on future workshops. I appreciate you stopping by. Enjoy the weather. It's a beautiful day. Talk to you soon.